Hello and welcome to Autistic FM. My name is Haya. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the pilot light that ensures that the gas keeps on burning on this enlightening journey. Get it? Enlightening, because gas? Never mind. Journey through neurodiversity. You can subscribe to Autistic FM wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be really incredible if you did. That's how we grow and how these powerful stories get shared with even more people. Over on our website on autistic.fm, you can find episode transcripts, additional resources, and vibrant discussion threads for each episode. We also offer a Neurospicy forum that's open to all. By supporting us with just $5 a month, you can unlock perks like sneak peeks at upcoming topics, the chance to submit questions for our guests, and access to a supporters-only group. Stay tuned for even more exclusive content coming your way. In this episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by Michelle Markman, an exceptional executive coach who specializes in empowering high-achieving women, especially those who are neurodivergent. She shares her journey of discovering her own autism at age 27, her initial denial, her eventual acceptance, and then advocacy for a diverse spectrum of neurodivergence. We dive into the challenges of navigating corporate spaces as an autistic woman, setting boundaries, avoiding burnout, and the essential role of self-care in all of this. I do have a quick trigger warning. We touch on themes such as self-identity and diagnosis, mental health struggles like depression and burnout, we talk about trauma, we talk about PTSD, as well as the societal expectations and discrimination. Please do take care of yourself and listen accordingly. Oh, you may have noticed that we used to drop episode twice a week, but I'm in the middle of moving house and stuff, so we're going to dial it down a little bit and do weekly episodes for a little while until I'm settled back into my new place. I have my new studio up and running, and we can go and drop episodes more often again. All right, let's roll the tape. Hello and welcome back to Autistic FM. I am joined by a really exciting guest. Would you tell me your name and your pronouns, please?
Hi, I'm Michelle Markman, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hello. Where in the world are you?
I'm in Orange County, California.
Awesome. And I'm curious, what is your history with neurospiciness?
So I grew up the neurotypical sibling of an ADHDer, and it wasn't until I was about 27 when I was in college and using disability services, extra time on tests, private testing space, that I ended up being diagnosed as autistic. So turns out I was not the neurotypical sibling. I was the high masking sibling, and it was the
Did that come as
90s.
a surprise to you?
I was shocked and I was in absolute denial for probably 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had never met or been acquainted with anyone who was high masking, and so
Mm-hmm.
I thought the diagnosis was incorrect.
Interesting. What do you think now?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% definitely autistic, and I use accommodations and I identify with the community. I think just understanding that there is differences in how people present, I'm asking, for example,
Mm-hmm.
really helped me to understand that it's a spectrum. Once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, everybody's different. So, and I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of my advocacy work is really educating others that everybody is different and you can show up 100,000 million different ways and be neurodivergent.
Yeah. What flavor of neurodivergences are you working with?
Working with or myself.
I suppose on both, but let's start with you. How
Yeah.
does your neurodivergence show up? You mentioned accommodations. I'm curious.
Yeah, so my particular flavor, I guess, would be I'm very sound sensitive. So I like to
Mm-hmm.
use noise canceling headphones all the time. It's just something I like to have in. I'm ready for music and it deadens the sound around me because, again, I'm very sound sensitive. I'm a super taster, so I can taste all of the ingredients in whatever I'm eating. So basically, I can cook a meal if I've eaten it because I can tell what's in it. Colors are more vibrant for me, which I think is common for a lot of us. I think I'm just probably really sensitive to my environment.
Yeah. No, I recognize a lot of that. It was funny when I first learned to cook. I had a housemate for a while who saw me cook once and was like, "Oh God, you need some help." And he was like, he was a pastry chef at I think it had a Michelin star, but like a really high-end restaurant. But obviously was a really good cook. And he got me a book that was like the flavor wheel or something, like things that go together. And it didn't make any sense to me. I was like, this is so theoretical. And then he was like, well, so how do you cook? And I was like, well, I like smelling the food. I was like, oh, well, that's reasonable. And so he gave me permission to cook by smell, which was one of those things where I was like, wait, what even is this? But as soon as I started doing that, I enjoyed cooking so much more. I was like, oh, I smell it. I'm like, what smell would I add to this to make this more pleasant sensory experience? Like, oh, maybe some dill, or oh, maybe a pinch of like black pepper would add something to this. And it turned out it worked. Like that with like small taste to see if it's salty enough. Together, it's like, oh, I'm actually a really good cook, but I cook almost entirely by smell. And so you as a super taster, I don't think I have that, but I definitely have like the adjacent thing. And it's so fascinating to, again, to your point earlier, it's a spectrum. Like we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but like it's fascinating how opposite ends of this particular slice of the spectrum, I should say. But it's so fascinating to get to know people who have like the sliders turned to 11 on certain things that I don't experience.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really interesting. And on the other side, you mentioned you do this for a living.
I do. Yes.
Yeah,
I'm a
tell me more.
coach. Yeah, I'm an executive coach. So I work with high achieving women, specifically those who are either highly sensitive or neurodivergent in the executive
Mm-hmm.
space. So any kind of leadership role or leadership position, if you're dealing with burnout, you need more time in your day and you don't know how to get more hours out of the 24 that you've got, that's my
Mm-hmm.
specialty. So I help women recover from burnout, really learn how to set boundaries, and really step into their own power as leaders in leadership roles and get hours back in their day.
Beautiful. Where do you begin?
That's a great question. I think it's very individual. So it depends on the person. What are they struggling with? What's their biggest pain point? And where is that coming from? And that's generally where we'll start. So a lot of the time it's relationships, whether it's business relationships or relationships outside of work or a combination of both. I
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of challenges around self-care, especially with working moms, because
Mm-hmm.
we're expected as moms, I'm a mom, we're expected to do everything for everyone else. And the old adage that says if you don't fill your own cup first, you can't help anyone else. It's really true. So a lot of the time we start with self-care and setting boundaries and learning how to really put yourself first.
Mm-hmm. How does one set a boundary?
That's a great question. I think it depends on context, but a boundary is setting the boundary is the easy part. So that is basically telling someone what you allow, like how you allow them to treat you or how you allow them to interact with you. So, for example, if someone yells at you, you could say, I'm not able to be yelled at, but if you'd like to have a conversation with me, I'm more than happy to do that with you. I'm going to step out of this room and we can all calm down. And then when we're all feeling calm, we can come back and have a reasonable conversation. But at this point, I need to leave to protect myself. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important to realize that boundaries are all about what you'll allow for yourself and not about controlling other people. And I think that's
Yeah.
where we, especially as neurodivergent individuals, can get confused and can really struggle because we think the boundary about controlling someone else. No, it's really about controlling how you allow other people to treat you and what you allow to be in your environment and how others communicate with you and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And to make it even more explicit, it sounds like you're attaching consequences to other people's behavior. If you continue to do this, I will do this kind of thing.
Well, you have to have a consequence because if you have a boundary without a consequence, that's like a wish.
Right. Well, and the consequence has to be something you can control, right?
Yes. So you can't say, if you can stop yelling, I'm going to insist that you stop yelling, or I'm going to
Right.
make
Stop
you
or I'll say
stop
stop
yelling.
again.
Right, exactly. It has to be something you can control. So you could control
Yeah.
leaving the environment. And I think, especially in business, there's not enough discussion around setting boundaries. I've had multiple different interactions, and I'm sure you have too, as a senior leader, where someone has been disrespectful to me. And I think
Right.
it's important that everybody knows that you have the right to say, I think we could both benefit from a greater level of mutual respect right now.
Right.
I'm feeling like this is getting uncomfortable. How can we get back to baseline, get back to a place where we're both feeling respected? How can we get back to that
Absolutely.
like beginning level of communication and call someone out on it? And don't feel bad about
Totally.
calling someone out on it, because everybody has
Yeah,
bad days and people bring their bad days to the office. And I think it's important to remind people that you have every right to stand up for yourself, no matter where you
totally.
are.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one, right? I feel like a lot of people are promoted into management roles without really being taught what it's like to be a manager and without really pausing to think, oh, what were the good and inspiring managers I had over the time, right? I founded a number of companies and I've had many staff over the years. And one of the ways that I've sometimes had to speak up was like, hey, in this conversation, it appears that you need something from me. But the way you're talking to me makes me really uninclined to acquiesce whatever it is that you need. So can we have a do-over? Can you pretend that you just walked into the room? Can we try this one more time? Because right now, whatever you're going to ask, I'm probably going to say no because I'm pissed off with you. Let's try this again. Let's shake it out. Let's try it again. And with some people, that really works. And other people just think I'm a patronizing git, but I'm like, sure, that's fine. It's me trying to model how I want to be communicated with, right?
Yeah, and if someone thinks you're patronizing for setting a boundary and for saying you're going to speak to me with respect, that's probably not
Right.
someone you want to work with. So that helps you
100%.
identify that, right?
Well, and in personal universes as well, like in interpersonal relationship and partnerships and friendships and girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, like the expression that really comes to mind for me is, look, I hold a boundary with the people I want to keep in my life. Because everybody else, I was just like, whatever, I don't need to hold a boundary with you. I'm just going to cut you out altogether. It's much easier,
Right.
especially for somebody who is not confrontational or not. It takes emotional labor to choose to hold boundaries and to choose to keep somebody in your life when they're doing something that you're not okay with. And for small transgressions, whatever, but for like serious transgressions, that's a very important skill to learn, I think. And especially when you're in a position of leadership, when one way or the other, you're modeling what's happening out there and you're setting a cultural bar for your company.
Absolutely. And I really liked how you said hold a boundary, because I think where a lot of people go wrong or get confused with boundaries is they think it's a set it and forget it process. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it's not like automating your banking. You don't
Right.
just set it and forget it. You can't set a boundary once and just expect it to be honored. That would be wonderful if it is. And let's
Right.
hope it is. But let
Yeah.
me tell you, most
Boundaries
of
on
the time,
autopay.
right? Most of the time, people are not going to remember that boundary until you've said it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times,
Right.
depending on the person. So it's really something that you have to set and then remind and set it again. I think that's what's most challenging, especially for people pleasers, women, neurodivergent women who are people pleasers.
All
When those
stacks
of
up.
us, yeah, exactly, who just are people pleasers, is we think, oh, we'll set a boundary once. And then if it's not respected, it's like, well, what do we do now? You have to
Right.
set it again. So,
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting thing, an interesting corner of this around neurodivergence, which is people who have rejection sensitive dysphoria, right? You like, I've explained to people in the past, like when I feel rejected, or even if I perceive to be rejected, I feel physical pain. It is a physical
mhm,
discomfort that borders on pain.
mhm,
And when I hold a boundary, I'm always scared, like, oh, am I inflicting that pain on somebody else? And somebody very smart said to me, it's like, that is not yours to hold. Like whether or not that other person is experiencing pain by you holding a boundary is not something you need to in any way pay attention to. You don't get to hurt somebody on purpose, but what's happening in their world when you're holding a boundary is theirs to deal with. And to me, that was such a, oh, because I think what I internalized was that it's my responsibility how everybody around me reacts to everything I do. And that's a hard one to unlearn.
I think partially we're raised that way as neurodivergent individuals, that we
Right.
are responsible for the people around us. We're trained that we need to mask and that we need to make other people comfortable and that boundaries are
Right.
not acceptable and that we have to put everyone else first. And I think it's really important that we take the time to unpack that and
Yeah.
unlearn that and start over and really just decide what we want in our life, what we don't want in our life, and realize what things we're holding that we need to give back. Like what you just said there.
Yeah.
It's not your responsibility how someone else feels when you set a boundary, but I can absolutely relate to you saying that. And that has been a big personal struggle for me as well. It's just wanting everyone to feel good. And as being a highly sensitive empath as well, I can feel when someone's not happy with me and it makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
So,
Oh, there's so many directions we can go from here. How did you do that work with yourself? Like how, presumably you are now more okay with holding boundaries than you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. How did
Yes.
you do that work? How did you get there?
I think a lot of it was educating myself. I've read a lot of books on boundaries. I'm a huge bibliophile. I read constantly. It's one of my
Hmm.
passions. I probably read 50 to 100 books a year. And so I read a lot of books on boundaries and I started following boundary influencers because they're out there. And then I started practicing a little bit at a time and really
Hmm.
setting boundaries with everybody in my life and just learning how to set the boundary, how to reinforce the boundary. And then as you do it, I think you get more confidence with yourself. And then also it comes back to self care, especially for women. The more you take care of yourself and the more you show up for yourself and you're reliable, you do the things that you tell yourself you're going to do, the more self respect you'll have, and the easier it is to set boundaries and to reinforce them.
Yeah. You mentioned start with something small. If the listener at home would like a homework assignment, where would you start? In your journey, what felt like a small, accessible boundary to set with someone?
I think if we're talking about in a corporate setting, for example, I don't think that every person knows that you can turn down assignments. If you get an
Right.
assignment that is not high value to your particular role, that's not going to move you forward, that's possibly a busy work assignment, you have every right to say, I don't have the bandwidth for this at this time because I'm working on XYZ. If you need to give an explanation, let them know what you're already working on. Do we need to shift things around so that I can take on this task,
Mhm.
or can this be delegated elsewhere? Because I think a lot of us, especially as neurodivergent individuals, are just like, oh, yeah, we can do everything. Just let us drink the water through the fire hose, but we can't. And that's why we burn
Right.
out.
Well, and I think the truth is you can do everything. But in corporate world in particular, right? If you become the busybody, you become stuck being the busybody. If you are the strategic leader who does high leverage tasks, it's the multiplication factor of you being able to do something. Like 5 minutes of your time should be worth 60 minutes of somebody else's time. Great. That means that you do something really well and you saved somebody else an hour worth of work. That kind of work is worth doing, I think. But of course, that means that you do need to have openness and transparency across the org about who is good at these things. It's like, hey, could you ask Peter? Because I think actually he's better positioned than me to do this particular task, for example.
Yeah, and that brings us back to networking. So it's always good to
Right.
network within your organization and get to know who's good at what. And I think as neurodivergent individuals, we are really good at pattern recognition. So it's pretty easy to
Mm-hmm.
figure out who has what skills. I'm not saying it is for everyone, but I would say for the majority of us, it's probably pretty easy to figure out who has what skills. And then
Yeah,
you have
totally.
that in your back pocket if your boss or someone else brings you a assignment that is going to waste your time.
Totally. And you can hack this to be in alignment with what you love as a person, right? Again, everybody's
Yeah.
slightly different. I love systems. Like, I love knowing how systems work. And when I was in corporate, the way I hacked that was like asking everybody, what do you wish you were doing? What do you wish you were doing more of? Right. And in the process, they'll tell you because that's the thing they get excited about. Right. But the cool thing is that means that you may be better than anybody else in the org who is best positioned to take on a piece of work. Like, hey, could you get Peter to do that? Oh, I don't think Peter can. I was like, I think Peter can. I think Peter wants to. Throw it at him and see what happens thing. Right. And I think that's a really powerful social engineering part of if you manage to gamify it for yourself and if you enjoy that, that can be really fun. And if it feels like pointless small talk, then you'll burn out on that, right?
Mm.
So, how do you deal with that? I feel like a lot of us are particularly poor at what I perceive as small talk, but that is an important part of networking. Or am I saying that wrong?
I think it is an important part of networking. I tend to go to just the standard stuff like the weather, current events. How's your family? How are you? Do you have any plans this weekend? And I do think it's important, but it can also be frustrating and exhausting if you don't understand sort of the structure around small talk.
Yeah.
So I think really learning about what the structure is and what the function is, like the question, how are you? I think
Yes.
drives the neurodivergent population nuts because we
Right.
want to tell you and you don't
Yeah.
want to know. But
Precisely.
really understanding that it's a greeting, it's like saying hi.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to know how you are.
Right.
was
Well, I
helpful
think
for
it's
me.
an interesting piece. There are so many small talk topics that I feel the words tumble out of my mouth. Something about the weather. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about the weather. I could not care less about the weather. I grew up in Norway. I bring a coat. I don't know. I don't care. And even when I'm telling myself, oh, this is a social construct for getting closer to someone, I'm like, I don't. At some point, when I get close enough to people, whether corporate or in person, I just tell them, it's like, hey, I abhor small talk. I would love to do big talk with you. And if that's okay with you, let's talk about stuff that actually I'm curious about and that I think matter. And if you also think that, then we can have a great thing. And at some point, somebody was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, okay, well, when was the last time you cried? And they were like, I was like, exactly. Well, that is something that I'm curious about because I cry all the time. And you can ask me that question anytime. And I understand it's probably personal. And if you don't want to answer it, say no. But now we're having a connection that is worth having. Like us bonding over what you had for lunch or what the weather is. Like, I don't care. I really genuinely cannot pretend to care. And that gets me in trouble, right? Because I'm like, I just can't. I can't do it.
I think once you build a certain level of connection, or dare I say intimacy, even if it's in a
Yeah.
corporate setting, that's appropriate. But you have to form the connection first. You can't just walk up to someone and be like, so when's the last time you cried?
In the lunch
Good.
line. Like
But
now, actually, I'm really uncomfortable by the question. Like, got it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
no, I understand that too. But the truth is, I think people notice if I'm asking questions that I don't actually care about the answer to, I think they see it in my face. Like my
mhm.
face is not very good at lying. And so if I ask, oh, what did you do on the weekend? I'm like, I'm bored before you even start talking because I don't care about the answer. And that I'm sure that makes me a not very good corporate person. And I didn't last long in corporate, I'll be super honest with you. And so I found myself drawn to industries and verticals and markets and stuff. Like I'm a pitch coach now. I help startups raise money. And I feel like I'm 25% therapist in every one of my sessions. And I tell people, look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a finance person, and I'm not a therapist. If you need professional services, get professional services. But I've been around the block often enough that I can spot some patterns.
Mhm.
And sometimes as you say, hey, pause for a second, you sound really manic right now. Like you're stumbling over your words, the story isn't coming out right. What's going on? What's happening for you? Like, how can we get you grounded? Do we need to take a couple of breaths? How can we get you back to this call? And people are confused that I noticed, but usually, not always, but usually very appreciative. Like, oh yeah, actually something just happened. I find it really hard to like be here right now. I'm like, great, awesome. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I do that also in my coaching. I do
Mm-hmm.
grounding techniques with my coaching clients. And I think that there is a level of connection that you can get to when you can bring someone down from panic or frustration or whatever is
Yeah,
spinning in their head, and you can bring them back into the moment right now and really reconnect. Because if someone's off somewhere else, they're not going
right,
to be able to get whatever it is they're trying to get from you, and you're not going to be able to achieve the goal or get the transformation that you're trying to get. You've got to be able to
right,
bring them back down and reconnect
exactly.
them to where they are now.
But I feel
It's
like
really valuable.
downregulating and upregulating is something we learn as coaches. But there is a place for that in the corporate world too, especially if you're
Yeah.
managing people, right? If you're managing people, and people are messy and chaotic and human, it turns out. Most of them are
Yes.
human. And so it turns out that you have this world of real, living, breathing, emotional humans. And it is shocking to me how few people know how to help somebody downregulate or just say, hey, like, do you want to take a minute? Or whatever it is. Like, I know how I do it, and that works for me. Because as you say, sometimes there's just no hope of getting anything productive done if somebody's like really dysregulated.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It makes me wonder, do people not know, or do they choose not to use those tools? They probably really don't know. I would say emotional intelligence isn't the most common thing, and it's not something that's taught. I really think there's a big stigma in the neurodivergent community that we don't have emotional intelligence, and that is very
Right.
far from the truth. We do. So that's an interesting question. We should teach it, though,
I think so
do
too.
those things.
And just to talk about the how and why, I mean, when I was in corporate, I didn't know I was autistic. I know I was weird and different, but I didn't know I was autistic. And I would often turn up to meetings or whatnot really dysregulated, and I just wouldn't know. Like I would just feel like I was stressed or whatever. But if somebody sat me down and go like, hey, you seem like you're not really with us right now. Like, what do you need? Like, how can we help you be fully here and be fully present? And I now have a whole suite of tools I can use, but this failing of interoception means that sometimes I don't even know that I'm all over the place. Before we started recording, I briefly dumped half my day on you, but that meant that I was able to be present, right? Like, oh, I
Yeah.
had a weird day for these reasons. And just speaking it out loud, what I usually refer to as an empty out share, it's just like, I don't need you to do anything with this. I just need to put it in the room and then it's out of my body. And then we can focus on having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a good point that it's important to have different tools for different times and different people, because some people really need more of a kinesthetic grounding technique. Some people are fine with just offloading the information and that'll do it. Some people need some kind of a visual grounding technique. So I have quite a few that I use with people, and I tend to ask my clients what they want to do. And I think that helps because they have some choice and it helps them be able to choose the anchor that they're going to be setting down, so to speak. And so they can come back into the present and have some control over it. And I think for us as neurodivergent individuals, control is something we love to have.
Yeah, I've lost track of how many times I've talked somebody down who is disassociating and like clearly not in the room, very activated. And yeah, there's some really simple techniques for that. But like somebody in the room needs to have those techniques, because otherwise this person is just going to sit there and be like way outside of their envelope of tolerance and struggle or not really be fully present or agree to tasks or things to do and just not even remember, because how could you? You're like way out there. So how do you work with people? Like, how do people find you? What do they, is there like a center of the bullseye typical type of person you work with, or is it a lot more varied than that?
Well, I've found that I tend to work with women, and specifically women who are in leadership roles. And at this point, I have worked with exclusively women with comorbidities. So
Mm-hmm.
I haven't worked with anyone that's like just 100% autistic or just 100% ADHD. It's usually like a little smorgasbord of different things.
Yeah.
So maybe autistic and ADHD, or dyslexic and dyspraxic and some sort of an autoimmune disease. I think that's probably pretty common within our population, is that a lot of us are chronic but iconic, is what I like to call it. We have a variety of different things going on. And the way that people find me is either LinkedIn. I also have a website, and I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook as well.
I'll make sure to link to all of those in the show notes. Yeah, I think it's so fascinating. The piece you just mentioned about comorbidities, I am starting to grow a belief that there is no such thing as pure autism. Because if you make it to adulthood as autistic without picking up a couple of mental health challenges along the way, like I feel like even just a chronic stress, like at the moment, my belly is angry with me because I've been in an extended amount of stress. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a physical manifestation of, it's like a third order effect, right? But at some point you have to deal with the symptoms of something. And I can't remember who said that recently, but somebody mentioned to me that it's really hard to tease apart what is complex PTSD and what is autism. Because it turns out a lot of people growing up with autism are essentially in constant traumatic stress from having to try and fit into a world they don't understand, to invisible rules that are not written down, unexplainable, that everybody else seems to be understanding just fine and they can't figure out. And that turns into CPTSD. And so teasing that apart from any other diagnoses is like really tricky. And of course, that's further complicated with autism being a spectrum and no two cases being exactly the same. It's like, oh, we're just this little petri dish of disaster over here and somehow try and figure it out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's important to work with a variety of practitioners. I personally work with a functional medicine doctor that helps me with my physical health. I had a lot of gut issues as well, and I've done a lot of work with my functional medicine doctor. I have a neurofeedback therapist who's helping me with my PTSD.
Could
I
you
work
say
with a
more about
coach.
could you say more about both of those? I don't really know what neurofeedback All the terms, please explain them. This is
Yes.
really fascinating.
Yeah. So I work with a functional medicine doctor. Functional medicine is an integrative form of medicine. So they're going to use things like diet, stress management, exercise, supplements to really help you. They're going to do all the standard sort of blood tests and other kind of tests as well with a functional medicine doctor, but they really get a big picture image of what's going on, and then they address it with a lot of lifestyle adjustments. So I've
Mm-hmm.
done some really intensive lifestyle adjustments. I'm on something called the autoimmune protocol diet, which is a
Mm-hmm.
pretty strict version of paleo. And I've been on that for over a year, and that's made really significant improvements in my gut health. And I had chronic stomach aches for probably years, and associated symptoms that I don't need to go into, which have been resolved from changing my diet. As
Yeah.
far as the neurofeedback is synonymous with biofeedback, where they hook up little wires to different parts of your body, and then your body responds to those wires and you learn how to downregulate. With neurofeedback, they just hook them up to your head, your scalp, and
So
it
one of those
teaches your
hat
brain.
things, or
It's not a hat. It's just individual wires that are
oh, okay, yeah,
individually attached onto the scalp. And they teach your
interesting.
brain how to downregulate, how to process information in a more sort of calm and regulated manner, how to be
Huh.
more relaxed, how to feel happier on a daily basis. It's really amazing what can be done with neurofeedback. And the way that it works is you just go there and they hook you up to these little wires, they put them on your head, and then you sit there and you watch a movie, the movie of your choice. And then the movie will blur out or get clear or get small or get quiet or go gray, depending on if your brain is reacting the correct way, the way that the neurofeedback device wants you to react. And it
Mm-hmm.
trains your brain. So it's brainwave entrainment, trains your brain how to be more calm, be more present, and feel better. It's
So
amazing.
really interesting.
I
Mm-hmm.
found EMDR really destabilizing, being that I was dealing with a lot of trauma at the time. So I ended up going into neurofeedback, and neurofeedback has been much better for me.
So for listeners who don't necessarily know what this is, what is EMDR and how does it work?
It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, you're either using hand paddles that vibrate, which you're holding in each of your hands, or you have a light bar that you're looking at. And if you're doing this remotely, you can do it on a computer. And I guess they put on this light bar that you would look at, and your eyes track back and forth on the light bar
Mm-hmm.
while you're talking about different traumatic events that you've gone through. If you have the hand paddle option, you have two vibrating devices that you hold in your hands, and they vibrate in different synchronicities while you're discussing the traumatic event and processing through that information. And the
Mm-hmm.
feedback helps you to process that specific event. But for me personally, I found EMDR to be very destabilizing. So I think it's important to recognize what works best for you and your neurotype. And I have found that anything that involves radio frequency or kind of vibration or anything like that, like a TENS unit, radio frequency microneedling, anything like that really messes up my nervous system.
Interesting.
So it's important to recognize what's going to work for you and what's not.
And important to speak up to the person who's giving that treatment that, hey, I don't think this
Mhm.
is working for me.
And
Because I feel like
it's
a
one
lot
of
of
the
the
gold
time,
standards. So
right, right. Well, I feel like a lot of the time people say, oh, this will really help. My initial reaction would be, okay, I want to be obedient. You say this helps, this will help, right? But even just the thought of scanning back and forth with my eyes, that is making me a little anxious. I tend to be pretty considerate about where I put my eyes. And I think this touches my challenge with eye contact as well. But like being forced to look back and forth, that sounds stressful to me. I don't, maybe it works, but it sounds stressful.
I personally found it to make me a little bit dizzy as well, with all the
Right.
tracking of the lights.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really think that regardless of whether something is a gold standard or not, there's so much bio individuality with each human, and it's important to know what works for you and what's a trigger for you. And
Yeah.
that brings us back to boundaries, being able to say, this isn't working for me. This is not a
Yeah.
treatment that's going to benefit me. And then
Yeah.
regrouping and finding something else.
Yeah, and I think this touches on like the need for like self-advocacy around your health and your wellness.
Absolutely.
And the thing that nobody ever told me, and I figured out way too late, is that I am the expert on my body, right? I am the only one who can feel what I feel. And so I need to tell people what I feel. It's embarrassing to admit, but I feel like I don't have body sensitivity object permanence. Like I am not aware that what I'm feeling might be different from what you're feeling. And I know that logically that doesn't make sense. Like, why would you feel what I'm feeling? Or why would I feel what you're feeling? Like being an empath aside,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a sense of like, well, how does this make any sense? Why should you know what I'm experiencing in this moment? And so being able to communicate it around that is really important.
Absolutely. And I relate with you on that. I think for years I thought everybody was having a similar life experience to me. I thought everybody had good intentions. I didn't even know what dark tetrad was. I didn't know that, 1 in 25 has a personality disorder and 1 in 100 doesn't have any conscience. So there's
Right.
no right or wrong. They can do whatever they want. There's no little inner voice in their head going, that would be wrong. We shouldn't do that. And I thought
Is that
everybody
what
was
in,
just good people.
right. In medical terms, is that what would be referred to as sociopathy?
Yes. The dark
Not to
tetrad,
like,
yeah, dark tetrad would
okay.
be narcissism, Machiavellianism, sociopathy, psychopathy. I think that encompasses like antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah, and I think this is the interesting thing where it overlaps with autistic people don't have empathy, right? It's like I absolutely have empathy, but for some of these things, I cannot. Like, so I have a copy of the DSM just down here, and I find myself reading it because clearly, as an autistic person who has a book, I will read the book. And I was like trying to sit with what would it feel like to feel this for every one of the things, right? And some of them, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that. I've been in situations where my sensory inputs don't match with what actually is happening, and I can imagine what psychosis feels like, right? And so trying to build up like a level of empathy with what would it be like to be suffering from this thing. And then there's stuff in this book where I'm like, okay, no, this is wild. I cannot imagine. Clearly other people do. But that was actually a really helpful exercise for me to remind myself, oh, my experience is extraordinarily different from, and you mentioned comorbidities. My experience is very different from everybody else I have on the podcast, everybody else out there in the world. And that is okay. That is okay. That's not a shortcoming of me to not be able to empathize with absolutely everybody's experience.
No, and I think it's
But that
important
was
to,
like a big thing to get to.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's important to talk about these things so that people start to understand that it really is a spectrum and everybody's different. And it's not
Mhm.
just the stereotypes of what we think it is.
Well, and to your point, right, you had a sibling who was autistic, probably higher support needs than you. And so your conclusion was that I couldn't possibly be autistic because he's autistic. Was it your brother?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that makes total sense, right? And because your presentation was very different, you didn't recognize yourself in that.
Right. And there really is just so much stigma and so many preconceived notions about what autism is. The general understanding, I think, in the world, sadly, still is that it's white males and
Mm-hmm.
brown hair and big heads, and they spin in circles and rock and are nonverbal. And that is the
Right.
farthest thing from the truth. I mean, that's sure,
Right.
there are people that present this way, but there are also people that present like you and me, and there's everywhere in between. And we're all different and we're all neurodivergent. And I think that's amazing.
Right. That is amazing. And for some people's prejudices can be really dangerous, right? If you are a 6'4", 300-pound black man having a meltdown in public,
Yeah.
you are pretty likely to get shot
Yeah.
in this country.
Yeah.
And that is a real shortcoming.
Awful.
I have had meltdowns in public and I was terrified, absolutely terrified, because I didn't necessarily understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And how the hell should anybody else understand what was happening, right? And I told people, oh, I just had a panic attack. It's fine. It happens. But that's not what happened. It was a very different experience.
Yeah. Before I knew what they were, I used to read the DSM-4. I was a psychology major. And so I
Mm-hmm.
have a bachelor's degree in psychology. And so I read the DSM-4 quite a bit. So I was always diagnosing people.
Right.
And I
You
just,
are
yeah,
a.
yeah, I didn't know anything about autism because when I would read it and go, I can't relate to any of this, this has nothing to do with me, and go on to different disorders. So I always thought that when people were having meltdowns, they were having intermittent explosive disorder or something like that. And it wasn't until I really learned more about autism and about meltdowns and about shutdowns that I was really able to understand that it's something that we deal with. Many of us deal with it. I would say pretty much every neurodivergent person deals with either meltdowns or shutdowns or both. And it's just one of those things that we deal with. And I think it's important to talk about this stuff to normalize it.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have meltdowns very rarely, and I didn't know what they were, and they were scary, but what have you. And now I'm in a stretch of really high stress at the moment, and I have them every couple of weeks. But at this point, I planned them. Yeah, I
Mm.
know I'm having a really hard time. I'm just going to plan it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to trigger a meltdown on purpose because it means that I know I let the steam off and then I'm okay for a while. And so that means clearing space on my bed, making sure I have nothing sharp I can bump into. And then, I don't know, listening to a piece of music that I know really moves me or whatever. And then it's fucking horrible. But also the relief after is just like, oh, okay. Like my brain is moving at the right speed again. My body feels like aligned again. But the process of getting there is not pretty, not fun.
Yeah. I heard of this recently. I'm reading a book right now. The author recommends that you have a playlist for
Mhm.
when you're feeling angry, and you put on this playlist and you dim the lights in the room and you get a bunch of cardboard boxes and plastic wrap, packing materials, which we all tend to have because we get delivery.
Right.
And you just play this angry playlist. And she actually says you can start by rolling on the floor side to get into the mood and listen to it. And then you stomp around and destroy boxes. And it
Mhm.
helps you process rage. And I thought, this is a great idea. I have to try this, but I have not tried it yet. So I'm going to try that this month.
Yeah. Talk about thinking outside the box or something. Outside the packaging materials. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I did a workshop not that long ago that had like a lot of emotional processing tools as part of it. There was like 9 of them or something. And it was really helpful. A lot of them are like rage and like the explosive feelings focused. Yeah, somebody at some point told me, I think it was my therapist, that depression is anger pointed inward. And when I let those words sink in, I was like, oh God. I put it aside. I was like, hey, can we talk about this another time? This is a bit much to process. But I had some processing time later on, and I was like, oh yeah, there's something to that. There's like frustration, like helplessness that transmogrifies into deep sadness at not being able to impact the things that I need to impact in the world. And yeah, it's been fascinating to experience that, especially in this country, politically and socially and whatnot. Like, I just feel helpless a lot of the time.
Many of us do, especially right
Yeah.
now with this political climate.
Yeah. And I'm like, I totally get it. Vote for whoever you like. But I also have a very strong sense of fairness. And I think it just feels like people aren't playing fair. People aren't playing by the rules. We agreed on the rules and now we're using different rules. And the justice oriented person within me is like, if you play by the rules and somebody else cheats, that's not fair. That's not okay. Like, change the rules if you have to, but don't agree to one set and then play by another. That's not okay. And I think that shows up in corporate world, right? People who get
Mhm.
promotions for reasons that have nothing to do with their performance. That shows up in socially, people who are popular for reasons where you're like, oh, wait, that's not entirely fair. You've done something morally ambiguous there that made you popular, or whatever, like however that
Mhm.
shows up. I had to pad myself, protect myself, because I realized I was just walking around being upset all the time. And that's not helpful either, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of us go through that. I know in my 20s, I was very angry. I think I cried every day in my 20s. I just didn't know what to do with all the big feelings, about everything in the world. We're destroying the planet we live on. That's heartbreaking. Other people are cruel for no reason, heartbreaking. So
Yeah.
I think it's probably common that we have to learn how to cope with the overwhelming feelings and the injustices that are part of being human and part of living our experience. And yeah, I went through that, definitely. And I can say for depression, being anger turned inward, that resonates as well. And I know for me, depression has always been a protective mechanism because when I went to school, I was unschooled until high school. And then I went to high school and I was shunned by a high school of 500 because I was too vibrant and outgoing and friendly and nice to everyone. They didn't like me. So when I would walk up to people, they would turn around. And so I learned that by being depressed, by deadening myself down, by being quiet and small, I was more palatable.
Oh, God.
So that's been my journey in the last decade or so, is unpacking that and getting more loud and getting more vibrant and sparkly and being more myself to come back from that whole experience of learning that who I am is unacceptable. Because that's too bad. Sorry, you don't like me. Not your cup of tea.
Right. I say it on this podcast a lot, but the phrase, if I'm too much, go find less. Right? It's like, yeah, I'm just going to be me kind of thing. That's real. That's super real. You mentioned burnout earlier and that you help people with burnout. And I feel like we've talked about both depression and burnouts. And it's taken me a lot of learning to realize that those are not the same thing. Could you say something about what the difference is and how they're treated differently, or how you can treat yourself differently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think depression is this overwhelming, more a cognitive mental fatigue, and just almost like a cloud following you around. Like in Charlie Brown, there's that character with the cloud that follows him around. Like I would say that's the best description of what depression is, whereas burnout is really exhaustion from masking, from pretending to be someone that you're not, from taking on everybody else's emotions, from taking responsibility for everyone else's life experience, from having poor boundaries in your own life, having poor boundaries with yourself and with the people around you, from taking on too many tasks, too many responsibilities. It's really important to take the time to recognize when you're starting to go into burnout, because I think, especially for high achieving neurodivergent individuals, burnout is a part of our existence. And we have to be able to recognize, okay, this is too much. How can I scale back? Or how can I change a system? Or how can I support myself in a different way so that I'm not constantly exhausted and overwhelmed and irritated? You get the brain fog with burnout. You just feel completely drained. And it's like it's an exhaustion that goes beyond physical or mental when you're dealing with burnout. And I think it can be challenging to recognize what's burnout and what's depression. And, you can have both at the same time, or you can be dealing with
Right.
just one. But again, it's important to recognize what's causing the burnout and how to make adjustments to scale back and recover. And for me, and a lot of my clients as well, diet has been huge. Having grounding exercises, moving our bodies is super important. So even if it's just going for a walk every day, just some kind of movement is super important. Being aware of the media that you're consuming. I found that, especially with the news and this current political climate, I really can't keep abreast of everything that's going on. I will go into burnout. So it's recognizing what you have capacity for, and then again, setting boundaries with the media and making
Right.
sure you're taking care of yourself and all that.
Yeah, goodness. One of the hardest stretches of my life was when I caught COVID, and then my brain power went away.
Mhm.
And it turns out my masking was 100% brain power. So when my brain power went away, my ability to mask went away, and my life quality went to zero. Like I couldn't function out in the real world. And once the COVID lifted, I had a long stretch of what I thought was long COVID that I'm now curious if I was actually in a really long stretch of burnout. It matched a lot of, but not all the symptoms of long COVID. My doctor was like, yeah, that seems like long COVID, but we don't know a lot about it. So whatever, here's some things you can try. And none of the things we tried worked. But yeah, I'm curious if losing my ability to mask, whether that sent me into a pretty spectacular burnout. There's no way of knowing, of course, but thinking about it again now, I'm like, that actually makes an awful lot of sense.
That's an interesting perspective that I've never heard. I've always heard of burnout being a result of masking. So that's an interesting perspective that maybe it could be a result of not being able to mask as well.
Right. Well, because I think what I ended up doing was using all my brain power trying to mask, but I didn't have all my brain power available. And so
Mhm.
I remember walking into a shop and not finding the words for interacting with a shopkeeper, right? I put the things I wanted to buy on the counter, and it should have been pretty obvious from then onward what I wanted. But, like, I don't know. Like, do you want a bag? Felt like an existential question that I didn't have a good answer to. And so I just walked out. I was like, I don't know how to deal with this social interaction. I'm going to leave. And it was terrifying to not being able to function in the world to that degree. But yeah, it's a new thought, so I'm going to have to spend some time spinning on this one. But
Yeah,
it's
that's
interesting
really
for sure.
interesting. Yeah, and that sort of brings us to spiky profiles and to the low support versus high support versus low functioning, high functioning labels. It's really ineffective to call someone high functioning because with things such as COVID or other illnesses, our functioning levels fluctuate. So that's why we like to say low support needs or high support needs, because say if you get sick, you may go from low support needs to high support needs overnight. And it might just be one
Right.
instance, or it might be a week or whatever. So that's why we prefer low support needs, high support needs versus high functioning, low functioning.
Yeah. I think the additional thing worth weaving into that is that the high functioning, low functioning really is from a capitalist perspective. Can you hold down a job? Can you be a protective member of society? If yes, you are high functioning. It's like, well, I can hold down a job, but I also spend 9 hours a night crying because I'm burnt out from this job. Does that make me high functioning? Yes, everybody would say yes, because I'm able to hold down a job. I was like, well, my value to society isn't exclusively based on whether or not I'm able to flip burgers at McDonald's, right? There's other potential things that come into being a fully integrated human being. And I think that's where the high functioning, low functioning is actually a really horrible measuring stick. And the same is true for most of the rest of the DSM. It's all about like how annoying are you to others. It's very
Yes.
little about how safe or unsafe are you to yourself.
Yes. And I think that's also part of the confusion, I think, for people, especially when you're talking about high masking or female autism, is that if you're not particularly annoying to others and then you tell them I'm autistic, they're going to go, no, you're not, or you don't seem
Right.
autistic, or because you're not meeting that criteria. So I think it's important that we have conversations like this and talk about the lived experience and not just the pathology.
For sure. So I want to start thinking about wrapping this up. If somebody is listening to this and they are autistic, they're in corporate, they suspect they might be autistic, or they're somewhere on the spectrum perhaps, is there a gentle nudge from you about something to examine, something to do, something to, like, how should somebody start bringing that part of themselves, or should people start bringing that part of themselves to corporate land?
I think they should. And I think that's the beginning of really dealing with that unmasking journey and really starting to address unmasking. So, starting to recognize what masking is to you and when you do it, and how to start to unpack that. I know for me, a lot of my masking and a lot of my clients' masking is making other people feel comfortable and being so preoccupied with making other people feel comfortable that you're not paying attention to what's happening or going on with you or what your tasks are. You're just preoccupied with making everyone else feel okay. So, figuring out what it is for you and then starting there. If you notice that you're a people pleaser, learn about people pleasing, learn about setting boundaries, learn about different kinds of communication, and start there.
Yeah, I like that. Although it's interesting, I worked with a therapist and we talked about people pleasing. And she at some point said, oh, you should read the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. I was like, okay. I see from your face that maybe you've read it. I read the book and it was like microdosing toxic masculinity. It was
Won't work for women.
right. But it also shouldn't work for men. That book is really problematic. Maybe it carved a new path through the jungle in the 90s or wherever it came out. But these days, it is practically unreadable. You're basically giving people a recipe and an excuse for toxic masculinity. We've grown beyond this. This is no longer the right way to go. And it's fascinating, though, because, and I was actually angry with my therapist. I reached out to them and I was like, hey, so when did you last read this book and why did you recommend this to me? And she apologized. She's like, oh, it's been a while and maybe I should reread it. And then she had a different book recommendation that was also awful. And I was like, okay, I don't think this therapy relationship is going to work out because I'm a very book forward person. And I said, look, if between sessions you assign me a book, I will read the whole thing and I will come back to you with like a fully ingested book and like all the things. But yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make is that, yes, absolutely look out for sources about how to reduce your people pleasing. But some of the writing out there is unhelpful, shall we say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously not all the books are super great. Do you have some recommendations for books for like, I don't know, setting better boundaries or working with your people pleasing or anything like that?
Yes, I'm working on building a book list and I'll have that on my website or possibly my link tree.
Awesome. I look forward to that. I love books. Books makes me very happy. It's interesting. I was a completely voracious reader until the pandemic broke me. Between Trump and COVID and isolation and all the things, I stopped being able to enjoy reading. But I refound it again a few months ago. And so now I'm like elated, absolutely elated. It's like I'm getting reintroduced to an old friend. And it's wonderful. It's like, oh, me and my Kindle. This is great. Yeah, it's beautiful. Hey, I promised I would keep this to an hour, and we're coming up to the hour. I would love to close this out with my two standard questions, if you don't mind.
Of course.
The first one is, what do you wish people knew about autism?
I wish that people knew that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Everyone who is autistic shows up differently. We have different interests, different skills, different challenges, different needs, and there isn't a look. So don't ever
Right.
say you don't look autistic to someone ever again, please.
Yeah, the only autistic look that is genuine is somebody wearing a T-shirt saying "I am autistic," and even then, yeah, I love that. And can you tell me of a time when you felt truly deeply seen and loved exactly in the right way for you?
Oh, that's a good question. There've been a few, certainly. And I think most recently it was with some moms that I've made friends with from my child's preschool. And they actually decided to throw me a divorce party because I'm getting divorced. And just the amount of empathy and compassion and just kindness and support that I've felt from them, just completely unexpectedly. I was blindsided by the love that I think that was the most recent time.
I love that for you. And what was it about that made it feel so like center of the heart muscle for you?
I think it's just that we formed this relationship really quickly, and it was really an authentic relationship. It started with the small talk, but we went pretty quick through small talk to the big talk. And it was just so refreshing to meet other women who wanted to connect and wanted to be friends and were authentic and were really kind and big hearted and moral and just the kind of people that you want in your circle. And then to have them
Yeah,
be so welcoming of me and who I am and how I showed up, and it felt really refreshing and really wonderful. And it was really unexpected.
I love that. Well, and it's like the thing that comes up for me with this is like you could show up to a baby shower and be completely vapid. You could even show up at a wedding and be like, yeah, whatever. You can be jaded about weddings. I think anybody who chooses to show up at a divorce party, it's like it's a self-selecting crew of people willing to participate in this very specific milestone in your life, right? It's like it's a beautifully curated gang.
Yes,
I love
just my
that.
closest girlfriends. Yeah.
Yeah. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. This was a delightful conversation.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Autistic FM. I hope you loved the episode with Michelle as much as I did. You can connect with us on TikTok at Autistic FM and on Instagram at autistic_FM. And don't forget to visit our website at autistic.fm, where you can subscribe for free to join in meaningful discussions about each episode and suggest guests that you'd love to hear from in the future. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Haya Camps, and expertly edited by Sean Portillo. It's been an absolute joy to have you with us on this journey. And as usual, here's a random fun fact to brighten your day. Did you know that honey never actually spoils? Honey is one of those few natural foods known for its incredible longevity. Its unique composition, characterized by low water content and high sugar concentration, plus acidic pH, it creates an environment that really discourages growth of bacteria and microorganisms. Additionally, bees contribute enzymes during the honey-making process that actually produce a small amount of hydrogen peroxide that further enhances the preservative properties. As a result, when properly sealed, honey can remain safe and edible for centuries. Incredible durability isn't just theoretical either. Historical finders support it. Archaeologists have discovered pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that, despite being thousands of years old, were still preserved and suitable for consumption. All of this makes honey a fascinating subject for scientific study, but it also serves as a reminder that honey is a really good natural sweetener, medicinal remedy, and an essential commodity throughout human history. Anyway, see you next week.